Have you ever wondered what happens when the two people who seemed emotionally connected suddenly disappear from each other's lives at the exact same time? Most people assume the silence means the relationship is over, but what if that silence is actually where the most important part of the story begins? What if, behind closed doors, an avoidant and an empath are both fighting battles the other can no longer see? The answers are far more surprising than most people realize, and by the end of this video, you may never look at no contact the same way again. When people talk about relationships, they often focus on arguments, breakups, or dramatic goodbyes. Yet psychologists have long observed that silence itself can become one of the strongest forms of communication. For an avoidant, silence can feel like safety, a way to regain emotional control without confrontation. For an empath, silence can feel like standing in an empty room filled with unanswered questions. But here is the twist that very few people understand. As the days and weeks pass, both individuals may be changing in ways neither of them expected. Their emotions do not stop simply because the messages stop. Instead, those emotions often become deeper, quieter, and more difficult to ignore. Many people believe the empath always suffers while the avoidant simply moves on. Others believe the avoidant never ever cares at all. These assumptions are popular, but they fail to capture the complexity of human attachment. Emotional processing does not happen at the same speed for everyone. While one person may feel everything immediately, another may not fully experience the weight of the loss until much later. This hidden timeline is one of the least understood aspects of attachment dynamics, and it explains why silence can sometimes create emotional shifts that no amount of arguing ever could. In this video, you'll discover why an avoidant often withdraws even when feelings still exist, how an empath slowly transforms during no contact, what psychological changes take place as silence stretches on, and why the ending of this story is often nothing like people expect. You'll also learn the surprising emotional patterns that researchers and relationship experts have noticed. Patterns that can completely change the way you understand distance, healing, and personal growth. Most importantly, you'll see why the outcome of no contact is not always about who comes back first, but about who becomes stronger because of the experience. So stay with us until the very end, because the final lesson may completely reshape the way you view emotional connection, attachment, and the true purpose of silence. Whether you've experienced this situation yourself, or simply want to understand the psychology behind it, every part of this journey builds toward an insight that many people never discover until it's too late. Welcome to Dr. Empath Psychology Hubrist, where we explore the hidden psychology behind relationships, empathy, emotional healing, and human behavior. If you're ready to uncover powerful psychological insights that can help you better understand yourself and the people around you, make sure to subscribe to our channel and join our growing community. Let's begin. To understand why an avoidant pulls away, it's important to look beyond the surface of their actions. Many people assume that emotional distance means a lack of love or interest, but that is often an oversimplification. An avoidant attachment style usually develops over many years, through experiences that taught someone to rely on themselves rather than others for emotional security. As a result, closeness can feel comforting one moment and overwhelming the next. When relationships become more emotionally intense, an avoidant may instinctively create distance, not because they never cared, but because vulnerability begins to feel unfamiliar or even threatening. For an avoidant, emotional intimacy can trigger an internal conflict. Part of them may genuinely want connection, while another part fears becoming too dependent or losing their sense of independence. This silent struggle often happens beneath the surface, making their behavior confusing to partners who interpret withdrawal as rejection. Instead of expressing fear directly, they may become quieter, less responsive, or emotionally unavailable. Creating physical or emotional space becomes a way to reduce the pressure they feel inside, even if they cannot fully explain why they need it. Another reason avoidants pull away is emotional overwhelm. Intense conversations, repeated demands for reassurance, or highly emotional situations can overload their ability to process feelings in the moment. Rather than confronting those emotions head-on, they often retreat to regain a sense of control. From the outside, this can appear cold or indifferent, but internally, They may simply be trying to calm emotions they have never learned to manage comfortably. One of the biggest misconceptions is that avoidants never experience deep emotions, or that they intentionally manipulate others by disappearing. In reality, many avoidants feel emotions just as intensely as anyone else, but they express and process them differently. Their silence is not always a sign of emotional emptiness. Sometimes it reflects uncertainty, self-protection, or an attempt to avoid conflict they fear they cannot handle. This hidden emotional world often remains invisible, creating misunderstandings that grow larger with every unanswered message and every moment of distance. When no contact begins, the empath often experiences silence very differently from the avoidant. Instead of feeling relief, the absence of communication can create an emotional storm filled with unanswered questions. An empath naturally tries to understand what went wrong, replaying conversations, analyzing small details, and searching for hidden meanings. Every memory can feel significant, and every moment of quiet may seem like it holds an answer just out of reach. This deep emotional processing comes from a genuine desire to understand, not simply to hold on to the relationship. In the early stages of no contact, overthinking often becomes the empath's greatest challenge. They may wonder whether they said the wrong thing, whether they could have prevented the distance, or whether reaching out one more time would change everything. Their compassion can make them focus more on the other person's emotional state than their own. They imagine what the avoidant might be feeling, create explanations for their behavior, and sometimes excuse actions that caused real emotional pain. This tendency to seek understanding can delay their own healing, because their attention remains fixed on someone else's inner world. As time passes, however, something important begins to change. The silence that once felt unbearable gradually creates room for self-reflection. Instead of constantly searching for answers from another person, the empath slowly starts asking questions about themselves. They begin recognizing patterns they may have overlooked, such as ignoring red flags, sacrificing their own needs, or believing that enough patience could fix every emotional distance. These realizations can be uncomfortable, but they also become the foundation for personal growth. Little by little, emotional chasing is replaced by healthier boundaries. The empath starts realizing that love does not require endless pursuit or constant self-sacrifice. They begin valuing mutual effort instead of one-sided emotional investment. Rather than measuring their worth by another person's response, they learn to protect their own peace, respect their own feelings, and accept that genuine relationships cannot survive on empathy alone. The silence that once felt like rejection slowly becomes a space where self-respect grows stronger than the need for reassurance. As no contact continues, the emotional journey of both the avoidant and the empath begins to shift in ways that are rarely visible from the outside. Although both experience the same silence, their minds often interpret it through completely different emotional filters. Time does not affect them equally. Instead, it reveals the unique ways each person processes attachment, loss, and personal identity. For the avoidant, the first stage of extended no contact may bring an unexpected sense of relief. The emotional pressure they once felt begins to fade, allowing them to regain what feels like control over their personal space. This can create the illusion that moving on is easy. However, because avoidants often suppress difficult emotions rather than process them immediately, the deeper impact of the separation may not surface until much later. As routines settle and distractions lose their effect, memories can begin returning with surprising intensity. They may start reflecting on conversations they once dismissed, noticing the absence of emotional support they had quietly relied on, or questioning whether distance truly solved the problem they were trying to escape. The empath's path usually unfolds in the opposite direction. The beginning is often the most painful, filled with sadness, confusion, and countless unanswered questions. Yet with time, the emotional intensity gradually decreases. Instead of searching for explanations in another person's behavior, the empath slowly redirects that energy inward. Personal growth begins replacing emotional survival. New routines develop, confidence returns, and emotional stability becomes less dependent on external validation. The silence that once felt unbearable slowly transforms into a space where healing becomes possible. The reason silence affects these personalities so differently lies in the way they experience emotional security. The avoidant often distances themselves to reduce emotional discomfort, only to process the loss after the immediate pressure disappears. The empath, on the other hand, confronts the emotional pain immediately, allowing gradual recovery to begin sooner. While one learns through delayed realization, the other learns through steady acceptance. Their emotional timelines rarely move together, making no contact feel like two entirely different experiences unfolding within the same silence. After enough time has passed, something unexpected often begins to happen. The silence that once seemed like a barrier slowly becomes a catalyst for change. Instead of remaining trapped in the emotions that surrounded the separation, both the avoidant and the empath may begin evolving in ways neither of them anticipated. Their growth usually happens separately, without conversations, explanations, or attempts to reconnect. Ironically, the distance that once felt painful can become the very space where both individuals start discovering parts of themselves that had been overshadowed by the relationship. For the avoidant, this stage may bring a delayed sense of emotional clarity. As life moves forward, they may begin recognizing the value of the connection they stepped away from. The absence of someone who consistently offered understanding, patience, and emotional support can become more noticeable with time. This realization does not always appear as dramatic regret. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through memories, comparisons with new relationships, or a growing awareness that avoiding vulnerability also meant avoiding genuine intimacy. They may begin questioning old patterns that once felt normal and wonder whether fear influenced more decisions than they had realized. The empath experiences a different kind of transformation. Instead of waiting for validation or hoping the silence will end, they gradually become more confident in their own worth. Emotional energy that was once invested in fixing another person is redirected toward personal goals, healthier relationships, and inner peace. They begin understanding that compassion is strongest when it includes self-respect. As this mindset develops, the desire to chase closure often fades, replaced by acceptance and emotional balance. At this point, perspectives on the relationship frequently begin to change. Both individuals may see the past with greater honesty than they could, while emotions were overwhelming. They recognize strengths, mistakes, and lessons that were difficult to acknowledge before. This is why reconciliation is not always the most meaningful outcome. Sometimes the greatest success is not returning to the same relationship, but becoming healthier, wiser, and more emotionally aware than either person was before the silence began.